Thank you so much, Annie, for your friendship, for that kind introduction. It is from time to time, of course, I run into Annie Custer in Washington, and your day just automatically gets better when you're exposed to that radiant positivity, but also, of course, we're thankful for your leadership. And I'm counting on you to send Annie Custer and Chris Pappas back to the U.S. House of Representatives to continue to be partners in change. We need them in Washington. I want to thank everybody for the chance to join you tonight. I'm so honored to be with Senator Jeanne Shaheen. First time I ever showed my face in New Hampshire as a student was knocking on doors, trying to help her get elected, and she is such a phenomenal leader in this state. Maggie Hassan, I'll have more to say about their leadership in a moment, but it's so great to be with you and your wonderful family here. Thank you for everything that you do in the U.S. Senate. And Ray Buckley. I got to know Chairman Buckley when we were competing against each other. Which, come to think of it, is how I got to know the president and the vice president too. And it says something about someone when you're competing against them and in that process come to admire and appreciate them that much more. Thank you for everything you, your staff, your officers, and your volunteers are doing. Extraordinary leadership for the New Hampshire Democratic Party. And I've just been so energized. You can feel the energy in this room. You can feel the energy meeting the candidates who have stepped up, from Dr. Sherman, who's going to take back the governor's office, to your executive council candidates, your House and Senate candidates, local leaders. I'm so tempted to say a word about so many of the friendly faces that I know, but I know I'm going to get in trouble here. So let me just say to all of you, I am so inspired by your civic energy, and I am sure that you are going to be winning up and down the ticket after seeing how much support there is for you here tonight. And you're making good on something that we used to talk about a lot when I was back here when I was running for president, which is even though I was here by way of that race, and I'm here now bringing greetings from another president, it is so important as a party that we never get caught treating the presidency like it's the only office that matters. You all understand that. You know how much power is in those local and state offices and those other federal offices. And of course, congratulations to the inspiring award winners tonight. I've been reminded just coming back here, I'm having, as you might imagine, a lot of flashbacks to campaign days and being reminded of how beautiful of a place this is, being reminded of how much kindness and hospitality people in New Hampshire showed when Chasten and I were first introducing ourselves around here. And it's just an honor and a privilege to be back here celebrating the leadership of our Democratic elected officials from the president on through. And I bring greetings from Chasten, who I know feels the same way about all the wonderful people we got to know here. And I get to bring greetings from two people who weren't even on the scene when I was up here before, our amazing twins, Gus and Penelope, who just turned 1 year old a few weeks ago. And I can't wait to introduce them to New Hampshire one day because it's so beautiful up here. I thought I understood what joy was, but I never knew joy like what I saw at that first birthday when we introduced them to cake for the first time. And they just smashed it right into their faces. It was the most amazing thing. I thought I understood fear, but I've never known fear like what we felt when they went through life-threatening health struggles, from which I am so glad to share that they have 100% recovered. And thank you for all the support that you showed our family. I thought I understood what sleep deprivation was. Between running for president and serving in a war, but nothing like in those first few weeks when I would go to bed as early as I can so I'd be ready when Chasten finally had to tap out between 2 and 3 in the morning and my day would begin. I thought I knew what was at stake in politics and policy. I thought I couldn't possibly be more motivated than I already was, but not the way I am now, that I know that the future we are out here working to secure isn't just mine, but also theirs. And that's why I'm so energized and so glad to be here, helping the Democratic Party and urging you to continue in your great work across these next 45 days to do everything you can to get the right leaders elected up and down the ticket here in New Hampshire, and to keep sending great leaders to Washington who can be partners in building a better America with President Biden, Vice President Harris, and the leadership that is moving this country forward and not back. So there's really just three things that I'd like to do tonight. I want, first of all, to reflect on the extraordinary achievements that we've made in less than 2 years, thanks to a Democratic White House and Democratic leadership in Congress and other offices. Then I want to say just a couple things about what it is we're up against. And then I want to finish with a reminder of just what it is we're building here. But let's start by talking about those unbelievable accomplishments, because with all of the negativity and all the controversy in the news, it's dangerously easy to lose sight of how extraordinary it is, how era-defining these policy achievements have been. Unsurprisingly, I'd like to begin by talking about the bipartisan infrastructure law. I'm pretty excited about it. The last administration talked a lot about building big infrastructure. This one is actually doing it. And it's happening in no small part because of the leadership of Senators Maggie Hassan and Jeanne Shaheen, who didn't just vote for it, they were in the room where it happened, shaping it. They are a huge part of how this was achieved. And the support of Chris Pappas and Annie Kuster and those other Democrats who voted for it, who were so important in getting it passed in the House. It's just one of many reasons we need you to send them back to Washington. In fact, this bill is so positive, it's so timely, it's so needed, I can't help but notice there's an awful lot of Republican politicians out there, not just those who crossed over to work with us and vote for it, but even the ones who voted against it, who are now out there celebrating the projects that are in that bill. And all I can think of is that, in policy terms, is the sincerest form of flattery. But a lot of Republicans did, in fact, cross over to vote for this. Again, largely thanks to the bipartisan instincts and leadership of your senators. So remember that your delegation was there for infrastructure every step of the way. And it's going to mean cleaner air and water, better transportation, of course, a better electric grid, broadband internet for everyone, and it means good paying jobs, and those are good paying union jobs, and we're so glad to have our friends from organized labor here. We're proud to be a pro-union administration, and we're thankful for everything you do. So no more infrastructure weeks. This is an infrastructure decade, and we are just getting started. And that happened after the American Rescue Plan. Let's not overlook the American Rescue Plan. We moved on so quickly from that to the next urgent struggle that I worry we haven't maybe told the story enough of an enormously successful action. Remember, 2 years ago, it was hardly guaranteed that our economy was going to come back at all, let alone come back to some of the lowest unemployment in recorded history. The most jobs created in the beginning of any presidency. And yes, we've got a long way to go building our economy back, but think where we would have been if it weren't for that rescue plan. So many things have been achieved. Something else your senators helped to deliver. Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson on the United States Supreme Court. Millions of women and girls who will see their own futures differently, not just seeing the president keep his promise, but validate their promise and potential as they watched a brilliant and qualified black jurist take that well-earned place on the highest court in the land. I could go on and on. The CHIPS and Science Act that is helping return manufacturing to the United States where it belongs and keep us a step ahead of competition from China. The PACT Act that will finally do right by my generation and every generation of veterans who were exposed to things like burn pits in Iraq and Afghanistan. That didn't just happen. Leadership delivered that, including some of the leaders who are here in this room. And of course, the Inflation Reduction Act that's going to lower costs for Americans, lower the deficit, finally allow Medicare to negotiate prescription drug prices, and the most significant climate legislation passed in any country ever. That is a big deal. In this Washington, where supposedly nothing gets done, we've done so much that it's hard to keep track of it all. So I'm just going to start going around calling it the big deal. Teddy Roosevelt had the square deal. FDR had the New Deal. So I'm going to say this body of defining achievements, this incredibly productive period, amounts to such a big deal that we ought to just call it the big deal. And if, in the tradition of our president, you'd like to insert an extra adjective in there, feel free. And this big deal, standing on its own, would define our times, and we would be proud of it for a generation, and it would be enough to motivate us to get out there and vote in November for the right leadership in this state, in every state, and federally. But of course, for all the reasons that Democrats have given us to get out there and vote, Republicans have given us even more. This is not only the era of the big deal, it is also the era of the big lie. And so we need to talk about what we're up against. And before we even get into the extremism and the danger to our democracy, let's just take a look at the basics of their policy agenda. Because every once in a while, one of your friends, your Republican friends, will say, I know, I don't like the last president either. They're a little nutty, but it's the policy. I'm there for the policy. I like the policy. But look at where that policy has gone. In the end, it has come down to really just 3 pillars of policy: keeping tax cuts for the wealthiest, building a wall, and ending women's reproductive freedoms. For the GOP, that is what it has come to, and everything else is extra. The first one, cutting taxes for the wealthiest, keeping loopholes open for billionaires, letting giant corporations get away with paying no taxes at all, so the burden falls on the rest of us. That's what they did under the last president, and they fought us tooth and nail on even the basic tax fairness that went into the Inflation Reduction Act. This cycle, they came out with the cherry on top. Senator Rick Scott put out a Republican vision that's not only for preserving tax loopholes for billionaires, he actually proposed raising taxes on poor people. I wish I was making that up. Eliminating Social Security and Medicare unless Congress actually renews it from scratch every 5 years. And now Maggie's opponent isn't much of a fan of Medicare and Social Security to begin with. This is the agenda. 2, build a wall. You know how you can tell that isn't very practical? The last president, Trump, didn't even do it. They don't have a solution on immigration either. And their third key policy priority, to strip away a woman's right to choose. They took away a right that women have had in this country for half a century. And if that weren't enough, now they are pushing abortion bans like what you have here in the state of New Hampshire and a national one in Congress. Again and again, they are showing how out of step they are with the American people. And you might be thinking, of course we oppose their agenda, their extreme agenda here on the policy front, but what about the fact they seem to be turning about democracy itself? Isn't that the biggest worry of all? And it is, but I just want to make sure to connect the dots here. When these are their policies, when these are their priorities, those priorities aren't just wrong for America, they're deeply unpopular with the American people. They're out of step with the American people, which is why they're turning on democracy. It is precisely because their current economic and social agenda has become so radical and so unpopular that a dominant force within the once great Republican Party now feels the need to subvert democracy itself, denying elections, making excuses for insurrectionists, resisting common sense reforms to strengthen our system. It's because they know in a truly representative democracy, they would be defeated again and again. They've already lost the argument with the American people on what to do about the big issues. But they have decided maybe losing the argument doesn't have to automatically mean losing the election. That is why they resort to voter suppression, cling to the least democratic elements of our magnificent democratic system. Because if a democratic representative republic becomes more tolerant, more decent, more open, and more progressive over time, and it goes against their preferences, then instead of trying to persuade other people of what they believe, or themselves be open to being persuaded and update their own beliefs in the face of, evidence, Instead, they just try to make their country, our country, less representative, less democratic, less of a republic. These are not normal Republicans. We're talking about something else. Certainly not the ones in control of the party in Washington or in Concord, which is why so many normal Republicans outside of Washington feel politically homeless, and we should welcome them into the Democratic Party. Because those extremist elements, they have taken that party itself to a place that is just further and further out of step. It's out of step with most Americans. Most Americans understand that protecting our young people isn't about keeping books out of libraries, it's about keeping assault weapons out of schools. Most of our fellow Americans, including, by the way, most Republicans, not in Congress, but out around the country, understand that it's a good thing that Medicare will finally be allowed to negotiate drug prices on behalf of the American people. Most Americans understand we pay too much for insulin, and they don't understand why congressional Republicans blocked making it $35 a month for everybody and tried to stop us, but we succeeded, thanks again in part to your delegation in getting it to be $35 a month for anybody on Medicare. They're with us on that. Most Americans believe you ought to be able to be who you are and love who you love, and they respect the idea that a marriage like mine counts as much as anybody else's. Most Americans know that climate change is real and that there is opportunity and jobs as well as urgency in the race to do something about it. Most Americans support public education and support our teachers. No one asks for culture wars anytime there's a gay Muppet or a black mermaid on TV. We need funding, public funding for public schools. That's what our teachers need, that's what our kids need, and that's what most Americans expect. Most Americans understand that in a free country, politicians ought to be energized about building bridges, not about banning books. That's what it means to care about freedom. And yes, most Americans are outraged that politicians just took away a woman's right to choose in this country. And I'm coming back to what happened to the right to choose, because what happened in the Supreme Court isn't just the culmination of this particular policy agenda from the other side of the aisle. It is something that, in my view, poses a fundamental and very, very important question, and the question is this: will we, our generations of Americans alive right now, will we be the Americans who lived to see the high watermark of rights and freedoms in this country? Will the centuries-long expansion of freedom in our nation come to an end right here in the 2020s and start moving in the other direction? Or will we restore what is perhaps the single greatest thing about America? The fact that each generation lives to see more rights and greater freedoms than it was born with. Whenever anyone talks about the American exception, about making America great, let's not let anybody forget that this is what makes America great. What makes America great is that the extent of our liberties and the boundaries of who gets to enjoy those liberties has always grown, always expanded from one era to the next. All of us have benefited from that. All of us are better off because of that. I know I've benefited from that. The very fact that I can be standing before you, having held the offices that I have held, having been taken seriously as a presidential candidate in this state, being a veteran, wearing this ring, and thinking about my husband and 2 beautiful children shows just one example of what it means in real and everyday life when those rights and freedoms grow. We will not let them fall away. We will not let those rights fall away, least of all in this state that lives by the motto of live free or die. And that's where I want to end. For all that we're up against, I want to focus not on what we could be losing, but on what we must be building. Not just what we are trying to prevent, but what we are going to protect. Precisely because our democracy is under threat, I want to emphasize the utter beauty and defining historical importance of the American democratic project. That project is incomplete, to be sure. It has never been perfect. We have never been all the way there. But we are always on our way to somewhere better than where we were. And if we ever weren't, this wouldn't be America. One of the most important facts about America is that this country, at its founding, made the decision to subject the leadership and the policies and the conduct of its government to the consent of the governed, and became right then and there the world's most consequential democracy. And the other most important fact about America is that our country knows how to recognize and address the exclusion of too many people from the definition of who gets to shape that future. Each time this has come up, the circle of who belongs in that democratic we the people has grown. We have exchanged empowerment for disenfranchisement. We have substituted inclusion for exclusion again and again and again, and we must continue to do so. What makes America great is our never-ending journey to become greater, our refusal to settle for things as they are, to let this country sit where it has been as if it could go no further, but rather to demand that we continue the constant betterment and growth that is written into the very structure of the Constitution, built to grow through the process of adding amendments, and the very structure of our country, built to grow by expanding membership in our union, and the very structure of our political system and social systems, built to grow by making room for ever more people on ever more just and fair terms. That is what made America great. That is what makes America great. That is what I signed up to serve when I joined the military, and that is what we believe in. We dare not fall back on that progress. It is existential for America. And I would even say it is indispensable for humanity, because no country this big and this diverse has come this far in this way. When our nation declared independence, the world had not yet seen a society of this scale moving forward with self-government. And to this day, the world has not yet seen a full-scale, truly representative, fully inclusive, multiracial democratic republic like the one that has been under constant construction here on U.S. soil for the last few hundred years. Humanity has not yet seen that come all the way to fruition, but we will. And I believe the world will only see it happen if it happens right here in the United States of America. I believe we'll see it in our lifetimes, if we safeguard it right here and right now. That's what's at stake. If that fully inclusive democratic society we've been working on for centuries actually happens, when we help make it happen, it will be as important a contribution to the human story as the founding itself. That is the ultimate expression of our greatest tradition, and that's what you and I are part of. That's what's at stake. That's why I am prouder than ever to be at your side, to be a Democrat in every possible sense of the term. So let's get after it. Let's work these next 45 days like we never have before. Let's leave it all on the field, and we will be so proud of what we built together. Thank you, thank you, thank you.